The first thing they teach you in business school is to identify market opportunities. The second is to never, ever tell your extended family what you're actually working on. I learned the second lesson the hard way. 3 years ago, I left my prestigious position at Morgan Stanley to pursue what my father-in-law Gerald called a ridiculous pipe dream. My app, Secure Health, used artificial intelligence to streamline medical record systems while maintaining rigorous privacy standards. Not exactly dinner conversation material, especially in a family that measured success by corner offices and country club memberships. Data privacy in healthcare, who cares about that? Gerald had dismissed when I first explained my concept. Hospitals have been keeping records for centuries without your fancy algorithms. What Gerald didn't understand, what most people didn't understand, was that healthcare cybersecurity was about to become a multi-billion-dollar industry. I had spent 2 years at Morgan Stanley analyzing healthcare technology investments. I saw the patterns, recognized the gaping hole in the market, and knew that whoever filled it first would redefine an industry. My wife, Elaine, understood. With her background in hospital administration, she recognized the potential immediately. This could revolutionize patient data management, she'd said, eyes bright with excitement. The current systems are nightmares, expensive, clunky, vulnerable to breaches. Her support gave me the courage to make the leap. We agreed to give it 3 years, living off our savings and her income as a hospital administrator. If Secure Health hadn't gained traction by then, I'd return to corporate finance with my tail between my legs, just as her family predicted. Those 3 years were the hardest and most rewarding of my life. I assembled a small team of brilliant engineers, secured seed funding from investors who actually understood healthcare technology, and worked 18-hour days developing a platform that made patient data simultaneously more secure and more accessible to authorized users. Throughout it all, I endured the not-so-subtle digs from Elaine's family. Her father, Gerald, a retired banking executive. Her sister, Catherine, a corporate attorney, and her brother-in-law, Mark, who never tired of mentioning his executive position at a Fortune 500 company. Only Elaine's mother occasionally asked genuine questions about my work, though I suspect more out of politeness than interest. "Still playing with your computer program?" became Gerald's standard greeting at family gatherings. "How's the unemployment treating you?" Mark would smirk, conveniently ignoring that I was working harder than I ever had at Morgan Stanley. Even Catherine, who should have understood the concept of building something from the ground up, regularly suggested job openings that would provide stability and actual benefits. For 3 years, I smiled through their condescension. For 3 years, I kept the details of Secure Health's growing success to myself. The major hospital system pilot program, the glowing write-up in Healthcare Technology Review, the second round of venture funding that valued the company at $40 million. Elaine and I agreed that success would speak for itself when and if it came. Then came last Thanksgiving. The day had begun triumphantly. After months of negotiations, Meditech Global, one of the largest healthcare technology companies in the world, had made a formal acquisition offer. $300 million for Secure Health. My team would remain intact, continuing our work with expanded resources. I would serve as division president for at least 5 years. The paperwork would be finalized the following Monday. Elaine and I celebrated quietly that morning before heading to her parents' house for the traditional family Thanksgiving. We decided to share the news after dinner, wanting one last family gathering before everything changed. The meal progressed predictably. Gerald dominated the conversation with stories about his golf game and complaints about the economy. Catherine detailed her recent courtroom victory. Mark boasted about his company's stock performance, pointedly asking if I considered investing whatever savings you haven't burned through yet. When the conversation inevitably turned to my project, I gave my standard vague update. Things are moving forward. We're in discussions with some interested parties. Discussions? Gerald scoffed, carving another slice of turkey. 3 years of discussions. Meanwhile, Catherine just made partner. "We're all concerned, Michael," Catherine added with practiced sympathy. This startup phase should have produced results by now if it was viable. "Why don't you get a real job?" My father-in-law sneered, jabbing his fork in my direction. 3 years of your silly little app, and what do you have to show for it? My wife squeezed my hand under the table as her sister chimed in. "Some people just can't handle corporate responsibility. Not everyone is cut out for the real business world. I felt Elaine tense beside me, ready to defend me as she had countless times before. But before she could speak, my phone rang. Meditech's CEO, calling to discuss some last-minute details before Monday's signing. "Excuse me," I said, standing from the table. "I need to take this." "Of course you do," Gerald muttered as I stepped into the study. Probably another rejection. The call was brief but significant. Meditech was actually increasing their offer to $320 million after their technical team completed a final review of our proprietary algorithms. I ended the call feeling simultaneously vindicated and exhausted by the charade we'd been maintaining. When I returned to the dining room, the conversation had moved on to Catherine's children's private school accomplishments. I caught Elaine's questioning glance and made a split-second decision. I nodded slightly, and her face broke into a radiant smile. "Everyone," she said, interrupting Catherine's story about her son's debate team victory. "Michael and I have an announcement." The table fell silent, all eyes turning toward us. Gerald's expression suggested he was bracing for news of our financial ruin. Instead, I placed the acquisition contract, which I brought to show Elaine's mother privately, on the table. "You're right," I said calmly. "The startup phase should produce results by now if it's viable. I just sold my failure for $300 million. Actually, make that $320 million as of 5 minutes ago." The silence that followed was so complete we could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Catherine was the first to recover. $300 million? She stammered, reaching for the contract. $320 million, I corrected gently, plus performance incentives. Dinner's on me next year. Gerald's face progressed through an impressive range of emotions: disbelief, shock, confusion, and finally something approaching respect. "You're serious?" he managed, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "Meditech Global." Mark read from the contract, recognition dawning. That's one of the biggest healthcare tech companies in the world." "Second largest," I confirmed. "They're making it public next week after the paperwork is finalized." Elaine's mother was the first to offer congratulations, rising to embrace both of us. "I knew you were working on something important," she said, genuine pleasure in her voice. As the news sank in, questions erupted around the table. What exactly did Secure Health do? Created a revolutionary secure platform for medical records that reduced administrative costs by 40% while enhancing privacy protection. How many employees did I have? 28 brilliant people who were now all millionaires thanks to our equity structure. Will we be moving? No, Meditech was establishing a new division headquarters in our city. Gerald, uncharacteristically quiet, finally asked the question I'd been waiting for. "Why didn't you tell us any of this was happening?" Elaine and I exchanged glances. "Would you have understood?" she asked her father gently. "Or would you have called it a pipe dream until the check actually cleared?" The uncomfortable silence that followed was answer enough. Later, as we were preparing to leave, Gerald approached me in the hallway. For the first time in our relationship, he seemed uncertain. "I misjudged you," he admitted, extending his hand. "And your business?" "It's healthcare data security, Gerald," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. Not exactly thrilling dinner conversation. "I should have asked more questions," he acknowledged, instead of making assumptions. "We all make assumptions," I said. "I assumed you'd never understand what I was trying to build." He nodded slowly. "I deserve that. But I'd like to understand now, if you're willing to explain it to me sometime." It wasn't quite an apology, but coming from Gerald, it was seismic. The ride home was quiet, Elaine's head resting on my shoulder as we processed the evening. "Are you glad we told them?" she asked. I considered the question carefully. Yes and no. Part of me wanted to keep succeeding in silence. But there's something powerful about finally being seen, really seen, by people who dismissed you. "They'll never underestimate you again," she noted. "It's not about me," I replied. "It's about challenging their definition of success. Maybe next time they meet someone pursuing an unconventional path, they'll ask questions instead of making judgments." The Monday signing was surreal. Executives in expensive suits, lawyers with elaborate contracts, congratulatory handshakes, and a wire transfer that transformed our theoretical value into life-changing reality. But even more surreal was the group text I received from Gerald that afternoon. Sent to the entire family, celebrating Michael's extraordinary achievement. Dinner at the Capitol Grill, 7 p.m. His vision and persistence have taught this old banker something about recognizing opportunity in unexpected places. Attached was an article from the Wall Street Journal's breaking news section. Meditech acquires Secure Health for $320 million, revolutionizing medical records security. The dinner that evening was different from any family gathering we ever had. For the first time, I was peppered with genuine questions about my work, my team, my vision for healthcare security. Catherine admitted she'd never really understood what I was building. Mark asked thoughtful questions about equity structuring for startups. And Gerald, remarkably, mostly listened. As dessert was served, Gerald raised his glass. To Michael, he said, his voice carrying an unfamiliar note of humility, who saw an opportunity none of us recognized and had the courage to pursue it. I've spent 40 years in banking thinking I understood business. You show me there's always more to learn. The validation was sweet, of course. But as I looked around the table, I realized the most valuable outcome wasn't the money or even the professional recognition. It was the fundamental shift in how this family, our family, understood success. 3 months later, Catherine's daughter announced she was deferring law school to work for a climate tech startup. Rather than objecting, Catherine called me to ask about mentorship opportunities and equity compensation structures. Gerald, most surprisingly of all, began investing in early-stage healthcare technology companies, leveraging his banking experience to help founders navigate growth challenges. These young entrepreneurs remind me of you, he told me over golf one weekend. They see problems the rest of us have accepted as normal. Success, I've learned, isn't measured by acquisition prices or impressing your in-laws. Real success is creating something valuable that didn't exist before, whether it's a revolutionary software platform or a new perspective that changes how a family defines achievement. As for me, I still work 18-hour days sometimes, building the next generation of healthcare security tools. The difference is that now, when I mention a new project at family gatherings, people actually listen. The money changed our financial reality overnight, but it was the 3 years of perseverance, of building something important while being dismissed, that changed how I define my own success. And that, unlike market valuation, is something that can never be acquired or diminished by anyone else's opinion.